Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Fandom Zone podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Charles Skaggs, back in the Fandom Zone once again, ready to talk The Boys Season 2, but I'm not joined by my usual Fandom Zone partner, Jesse Jackson. Jesse, as it turns out, has burned himself out a little bit doing Set Listing Bruce podcasts, like maybe 3 of those a week. So he hasn't really had the time to go through The Boys Season 2. So I reached out to someone I could depend on. And so everyone, please welcome to the Phantom Zone podcast. Joining me for this week and the next 7 weeks as we discuss The Boys Season 2, please welcome DJ Nick to the Phantom Zone podcast. How you doing, Nick?
Hey, Charles. I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity, to discuss a show that I know everybody's been talking about, both superhero fans and non-superhero fans. I'm sorry, that Jesse couldn't be part of the conversation because he always brings so much great insights to whatever he does. And I'll definitely try to do as well, or at least, my best to fill those shoes for sure, because those Texan boots definitely need some filling, so I'll do my best to fill them Texan boots.
Well, I think you'll do just fine, sir. And, I've reached out to Jesse. I've extended the invitation, so if he ever gets caught up, he's more than welcome to join us here for a discussion. I think it'd be a lot of fun, the 3 of us, to talk The Boys. But in the meantime, while we wait for Jesse to kind of get his priorities straight, man, we're going to talk to The Boys, like I said, Season 2. And we're going to talk here at episode 191 of the Fandom Zone. We're going to talk The Big Ride. The very first episode of The Boys Season 2 aired not too long ago on September 4th, 2020. Written by Eric Kripke, who wrote the Season 1 episodes The Name of the Game and Cherry, and he's also the showrunner of The Boys. Directed by Phil Segriccia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah. He directed the Season 1 episode Get Some, and I think they did a solid job, at least as far as a Season 2 opener. And I'm looking forward to getting your thoughts on this, Nick.
Well, I definitely think so, because, when I had actually watched the whole Season 1, I was like, wow, I'm so glad that Season 2 is already up because I get to watch it, because Season 1 was so strong, and as I mentioned before, it was so out of left field because I still don't think there's anything out there quite like The Boys. I mean, we have also on Doom Patrol talked a little bit on Titan Talk about the fact of Doom Patrol being maybe tangentially similar, but it's still different because Doom Patrol is even more comedic than The Boys. The Boys is humor, but has humor, but it's very, very dark. And I just think it's just wonderful that also gives so much social commentary as well. And the fact that superheroes are literally the villains. It's a total role reversal where the supes, as they call them, are the bad guys. And us mortals are the good guys. And it's a very new concept. And as I said, the themes they bring up ring so strong and true today as well.
Yeah, I think it borrows, at least from my understanding, from my comics background, I think it kind of borrows a little bit from the premise of like the Earth 3 crime syndicate. That was kind of like the evil version of the Justice League of America back in DC Comics. It kind of takes that basic concept that, what if, the big superheroes in charge were the bad guys? And you brought up a great point. I was glad you brought it up because I was going to do that if you didn't. That it tacks on this great social commentary. And it really kind of explores the concept of, well, what if superheroes were celebrities? Like true celebrities? kind of like like a lot of our music stars and movie stars and TV stars and whatnot, just that kind of media whores almost. And that a lot
Very
of them
true.
are. And that kind of exploration of that world and how it tends to corrupt you. And I think that's one of the central themes, on top of being a superhero show. That's this weird fusion of all these dark themes. And on top of it, though, there's an underlying story of heart in the form of Hughie and Annie. There's an underlying love story there that with all this chaos going on and all the drama of, Hughie's group, the boys, Annie's group, the seven, that it's almost kind of almost like a Romeo and Juliet type romance going on here.
Yeah, it is that kind of lost in the middle of all this chaos. Like you said, there is this room for love. I could almost compare it to, I don't know if you ever heard of the famous photo, the Vancouver Kiss, where basically
No, I haven't.
It had happened during the Stanley Cup final between the Vancouver Canucks and the Boston Bruins, and the Vancouver Canucks had lost. And so a major riot broke out in Vancouver, as it wants to happen, when it comes to hockey games.
Hockey fans, go figure.
Yeah, exactly. And you have, of course, this fantastic photo. It's so perfect it could have been staged, where you have people around fighting and this couple making out right in the center of it all. So that's why it kind of reminds me the way you're describing it of the Vancouver Kiss, because you have chaos, overturned cars and people just beating the hell out of each other.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria, exactly.
Yeah, and this couple just happily making out in the midst of it all. It's a beautiful photo. It's very poetic.
I'm going to have to look that up. That sounds great. Yeah, this one tiny little moment of calm surrounded by this huge hurricane. Yeah. Like almost like the eye of the hurricane, the eye of the storm. But obviously, Nick has watched season 1. I've watched season 1. Now, I'm guessing, like myself, you've probably watched all the season 2 episodes by now.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we are going to pretend we did.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, for the benefit of our listeners, we'll try to keep from spoiling things. I'm sure one or two things may slip in there. So apologies for that. But for the purposes of our discussion, I think it's probably best if we try to at least pretend that we don't know, or at least, so that for, like I said, anybody that may be just watching The Boys for the first time and, hey, maybe reached out to a podcast like the Fandom Zone and, was looking for that kind of supplemental material but doesn't want it spoiled ahead. So if you know what's going to happen, that's cool. We're not going to try to, overlook that because, like I said, we've both watched how this plays out by now. But I think it's going to be an interesting thing to talk about, going week by week. And this is kind of Nick's suggestion because I think, if I'm not mistaken, you kind of wanted to get a little bit more of a, get a little bit more detailed analysis than just doing a one-episode season summary. Or do I have that wrong?
No, you're correct, Charles. Also because, like I said, being a series, I think it's good to kind of like serialize when you're doing a podcast like this. Totally, it's fine, I guess, if people do recaps, but I think there's so much going on within these episodes. And we're talking about episodes about an hour long per episode.
Exactly.
So they're almost like short movies.
Yeah.
So, and I think they deserve almost to be, get an analysis, a separate analysis per episode because of the fact that they are so rich and there's so much going on. If it were like, a 25, 30-minute episode, we could have even done a season recap because it's actually quicker.
Right.
But a 1 hour per episode, like I said, it's a short movie.
Well, and then, like you said, there's so much going on in these episodes. Yeah. It's not a very slow-paced show by any means. Yeah. And I think that's one of the charms because of why it's kind of taken in popularity is that, it does have a lot going on. It's got a lot for the audience to kind of think about and enjoy, laugh at, cringe maybe a little bit here and there over, but there's always something going on. And this very first episode of season 2, no exception. So with that in mind, let's dive right into this. We could probably just, very quickly address the cast.
Sure.
Obviously, if you've watched season 1, it's a lot of the same actors from season 1. But, we have got the great Carl Urban as William Billy Butcher, who's not a major factor in this episode, but he does turn up at the end in a great reveal, great return. Jack Quaid plays Hughie Campbell, or as we know him in the comics, Wee Hughie. And, one of the central characters, especially, like I said, with his romance with Annie January. Starlight, played, of course, by the great Erin Moriarty, who continually seems to up her game every time she's on screen.
And nobody knew she could sing, which is crazy.
Yeah, go ahead if you want to talk about that.
No, I have to first say, one, she has a killer surname. As to actually be born with the surname Moriarty.
Right? How cool is that? Now, I don't know if she was she born like that, or was that a stage name? Either way, it's a great call.
Yeah, I mean, look, if it's a real surname, it's really, really cool because, like, you bet that at school she probably wasn't picked on for that surname, and probably even also in college, folks were like, "Oh wow, I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes. Are you related? I mean, did your family inspire Conan Doyle to create that character or this kind of thing?" Because of course it's a very Irish surname, and being an Irishman yourself, so she may just very well have Irish heritage.
See, I got Skaggs, and if I had gotten Moriarty, something really cool like that, I could have had the nickname the Professor in college. But no, I don't get that. I don't get anything that cool. So, unless of course I change my name, but I'm not going to do that. But yeah, I'm a bit jealous over that name. It's a very cool name, and yeah, she does this great song, and we can talk about that when we get into a little bit more of our discussion. But it's a song called Never Truly Vanish that appears a few times through the course of season 2 without spoiling anything, even as one of the end credit songs in one of the episodes coming up. So, and we'll get to that. We also had Laz Alonso as Marvin T, a.k.a. Mother's Milk, or a.k.a. MM, as Billy likes to call him. Tomer Capone, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is Frenchie. And this season we finally find out Frenchie's real name. Stay tuned for that one. Won't spoil it just yet. Karen Fukuhara, who I've actually had the pleasure to meet in person.
Oh, wow.
When she was doing conventions for Suicide Squad.
Yeah, because she was Katana, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was Katana in the Suicide Squad movie. So, yeah. So, Karen Fukuhara as Kimiko Miyashiro, a.k.a. the female. And she thankfully gets a little bit more to do this season than she did in season 1. Very happy about that. Antony Starr, holy crap, the Homelander.
Yeah.
I mean,
man, is that guy scary.
If you thought the guy was like one of the highlights of season 1, you haven't even seen season 2 yet because, or maybe you have, but you know what I'm talking about. But this guy is just so, I don't want to say
intense.
Intense, but I don't want to say charismatic because, I mean, charismatic in a villain sense. Like he's such a compelling, that's the word I'm looking for, compelling villain.
He's very compelling, yeah.
And there's a lot going on there, a lot psychologically behind this guy.
Yeah.
So essentially is like, it's Superman if he was psychotic, basically.
With a little bit of Captain America turned dark, if you will, as well, I think.
A little bit, yeah.
With that excessive patriotism almost, Yeah,
exactly. I think you're probably right. It's probably like a hybrid of Superman and Captain America, but a dark psychotic version, almost. Yeah. And then we had Dominique McElligott as Queen Maeve, Nathan Mitchell as Black Noir, Jesse T. Usher as A-Train, Aya Cash, who is a character to watch. She gets introduced in this episode as Stormfront, and I'm guessing Nick has one or two thoughts about Stormfront that we're going to get into.
Yeah.
So just stay tuned for that. Chase Crawford as the Deep, Colby Minifee as Ashley Barrett, kind of taking over as the Seven's handler, and following the tragic death of Madeline Stillwell at the end of season 1, and does a fantastic job of being all harried and way out of her league with the Seven. Thankfully, we got the debut of Giancarlo Esposito as Stan Edgar. And if you've seen Breaking Bad or The Mandalorian,
or even Once Upon a Time.
Or Once Upon a Time, you're right. That's right. Thank you for reminding me. You know what a great villain he is. Yeah. So, and this is no exception. Fantastic job. Chantel Van Santen plays Becca Butcher, and then we have Cameron Crovetti as Ryan Butcher, although they don't make their debut until next episode. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about them then. But in the meantime, so that's our cast, our central cast. Trivia, I got a little bit of trivia before we get into our discussion. The Big Ride, the title of this episode, comes from a 4-part story called The Big Ride that was in The Boys issues number 56 through 59. And that's the Garth Ennis, Derek Robertson and Russ Brown comic book series that was originally published by DC Comics, later published by Dynamite Entertainment. Completely different story from what's being presented here. So it's just basically the title only. In the comic book story, Hughie returns to the fold after he and Butcher are investigating a murder of a transgender sex worker that may be linked to a character of the Seven we haven't seen yet, Jack from Jupiter.
Oh, okay.
And tensions escalate between the two groups as unknown forces may be trying to steer them into direct conflict with one another. And with the first casualties from both sides since the aftermath of 9/11 occurring as a result. So obviously this was taking place at a much different time period, shortly after the events of 9/11. And that's something Garth Ennis incorporated into the Boys comic. That's obviously not being featured here on the TV series. But I just thought I'd mention it for anybody wondering. And also another bit of trivia. In the comics, Stormfront was depicted as a male character, not a female character. It's another difference from the comics. In the comics version, Stormfront was a member of the superhero team Payback, and he was thought to be a danger due to his deep belief in Nazi ideology, of course. And it was recommended that Vought destroy him. But instead, because Vought is Vought, as we know, watching the show, they used his genetic material as the basis for experiments that would later create Homelander and Black Noir.
Okay.
So Stormfront apparently destroyed the levees and caused widespread flooding in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. Again, you have to kind of take into account the time period.
Into context, yeah. Sure.
Exactly, because Garth Ennis was trying to kind of like, well, what if these big world big events were taking place shortly at the same time in this parallel universe?
Oh, sure, yeah.
And Stormfront was essentially aiming to ethnically cleanse the city and free up valuable real estate for Vought.
I see, yeah.
So that's a little different from the comics. And he ends up getting killed, though, by Butcher, Frenchie, Mother's Milk, and Love Sausage, who we see later this season, a Russian superhero, who essentially kick and curb stomp him to death. Kind of like something that happens to Stormfront later in the season, which we won't talk about just yet. So that's the differences between the comic and the series. Just thought I'd mention that. All right, so I thought we could break this down into 3 topics.
Mm-hmm.
Topic number 1, I think we could talk about, how about we talk about the boys, and let's also talk about Starlight. And let's catch up with the boys, obviously following the events of season 1. Butcher's missing, and the boys are kind of having to fend for themselves. They're fugitives at this point, and hiding out. We find out that apparently Frenchie, they've gone underground, and they're hooked up with like some friends of Frenchie, some associates of Frenchie, called the Clarkson Avenue Haitian Kings. And essentially they're a gang, and they're basically fund their efforts through drugs and whatnot. So essentially they're kind of hiding out with these guys, and while trying to further their activities and keep an eye on the Seven and avoid the law in the process. Any thoughts from you, Nick, on the boys' characters? Obviously Frenchie, Hughie, Mother's Milk, Kimiko, and how we pick up from them at this point.
Well, there is definitely a lot to say. I mean, I have to admit, at first, the first question on my mind initially was, what the heck happened to Butcher? Because obviously we had that crazy cliffhanger at the end of season 1 where, he's introduced, he finds out that Becca is alive and well and that they have a son now who apparently is Homelander's son. And so it's like, what happened to that? And at first I have to admit, I was a little bit shocked that they didn't go directly to where we had cut off from season 1. And that
you can say mad. If you were mad, it's okay.
Yeah, I was.
We didn't pick up with that.
I was a little bit mad, I have to admit, because I was like, because I was so sort of invested in, apart from that, I was invested in the Butcher character from the get-go, and it was such a compelling way to end season 1. So, throughout the episode, I kept saying to myself, okay, but where is Butcher? This is all fine and dandy, but where is Billy? But that aside, you can definitely see, I think, that our characters are, there's cabin fever, I think, is definitely setting in for most of them. Obviously everybody, there's tension amongst everybody because we know Mother's Milk had to leave his girlfriend and his daughter. I don't know if she was his wife or his girlfriend.
I think it's his wife, if I'm not mistaken.
So he basically
at least the mother of his child, at the very least, his baby mama.
He basically had to leave her and his daughter, and of course, French is cut off from everything, and Hughie, I mean, is from back in season 1. Life has just gone completely a 180 on him, and he's still trying. He's still reeling, I think, also from obviously the whole fact of having to, the liar revealed when it comes to him and Starlight, of course. And this is, a typical thing that we have seen before. It's like the guy keeps lying. It's like eventually the lies will catch up with you. And I was getting a little bit irked as how long are they going to drag this on till Starlight finds out or he tells her the truth. And so, we see that they are still meeting up in secret, of course. Even though, obviously, I mean, I think they still love each other at this point, but obviously they're not going to, make up and everything because
they're kind of afraid to address those feelings.
Yeah, because they never,
there.
When they're in that scene when they're on the subway, and I think to myself, my first question would be like, Hughie would, had I been Hughie, it's like, so when it comes to us, what's the situation, But no, he doesn't say a word.
They're still kind of estranged from one another. I think Hughie would obviously like to try to get back with Annie.
Who wouldn't? Let's be honest.
But I think Annie's still exactly right. But Annie, I think, is still feeling a little hurt of what Hughie was keeping from her, and so she's very guarded, although they at least have the lines of communication open.
Yeah.
So at this point, at least it gives Hughie something to hope for.
I think so too, and we can tell he gets incredibly jealous about the fact that apparently he's been checking her out on Instagram and seeing these photos with these celebrities and what have you.
Cyber stalking her, basically. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously he still cares, and he wants to call her and he feels he's lost a big something important in his life, obviously, but once again, he led her on. He lied to her. And even in this episode, he continues to lie to her. And he's like, I'll never lie again. And he's like, and he calls her and she's like, so what's the deal? Don't lie to me. Oh, I'm not lying. I'm not. I mean, really, either he's a pathological liar and he just can't help it. Or at this point, you think he would have learned his lesson and told her since he knows that she's on the up and up.
Well, I think he feels conflicted because he doesn't want to endanger the others. And obviously he feels, I think if he shares everything with her, there's always the chance that the 7 are going to find out.
True. Even though I can.
That's the dilemma. So he's being guarded with her. She's being guarded with him.
Yeah. And
as a result, they're not being honest with one another.
That's why you think to yourself, can this relationship work? Because they,
right.
as we, one can say it was almost, well, at least on Annie's part. And Annie's been honest with him pretty much from the get-go. He really kind of hasn't. And I see your points, but I also kind of feel really bad for Starlight because she is such a good person. And, it just really upsets me when I see those kind of things, because she's been lied to and she could have taken it way worse because she could have incinerated him had she wanted to.
Pretty much. And that's another concern is like, well, I don't really want to piss her off because she could completely blow me away. Right.
Yeah, there is that.
So there is that. Yeah, exactly. Or throw me around the room and break every bone in my body. But, and it's for me, it's a little different. It's very interesting to watch these two interact because in the comics, Hughie and Annie, they weren't really. Hughie didn't open up to Annie about his activities with the boys until about 2/3 of the way through the comic book series.
Wow.
So the TV show really accelerated that.
Well, I think they had to because they had to get rid of that famous trope of the guys will keep lying, and then by halfway through.
And why is Annie keep going back to him if he's constantly lying to her? Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. But it kind of gets Annie more involved with the boys and gets them helping out, and as we kind of see in the course of this episode, because they're essentially trying to get their hands on some compound V.
Yeah.
And they think this other soup named Gecko, apparently, at least Annie thinks, Hughie hands Annie a picture of Gecko and says that he might be able to help get that compound V. Can you help us get that? And she's obviously not sure. She apparently knew Gecko from back in the day.
I believe they performed like in a high school play, and he was Jesus. No surprise.
Yeah, it was whatever Christian group they were in together, almost like a Christian version of the Teen Titans, almost. I'm guessing. Yeah. And like whatever youth group, superhero youth group she was in with Gecko, and so it's just a matter of her reacquainting herself with Gecko, who, in the meantime, since all those years ago, has developed a rather interesting occupation. Shall we say?
Well, I mean, and of course it's totally in keeping with the style of the boys. The man keeps regrowing his limbs. So what's he going to do? He's going to cater to BDSM people who get off by chopping limbs off. So it did not surprise me. I mean, but yeah, because I said in the boys universe, this is like, run of the mill for sure. But yeah.
And apparently only cost you an extra $1,000 to cut his junk off.
Where's the nearest ATM?
Exactly.
That was a great line.
Yeah, it was. I've got some others, if we want to talk quotes later. But
I'm surprised they didn't give him more, should we say, attention, because this guy feels no pain. Okay, he might not be 7 material, but still.
It's useful, right?
Yeah.
You can send him into dangerous situations, and it doesn't matter because if he gets chopped up, he'll just regenerate. So
that's right.
His body parts.
That's
Not
right.
like in a Doctor Who way, different way, like a starfish kind of way.
Yeah,
but
also to look at the other guys. I mean, Mother's Milk. It's so endearing that he's trying to build this Vermont house.
Yeah, a dollhouse.
Yeah.
Yes.
Seeing this grown man,
this big black guy, like building, who is like, very formidable. He's a fighter. And then you see him trying to work on this dollhouse.
Yeah. I mean, the guy's bicep is bigger than my head. So
pretty much, yeah. He could crush you like a grape easily.
That's right. And so it was kind of endearing that he is trying to build this dollhouse amidst all this craziness of of like guns being sold and all the other stuff. I think it's almost like his happy place. I mean, I assume he's doing it for his daughter, but hey, he could have a hobby and just enjoy building dollhouses. Everybody needs a hobby, I guess.
But I mean, I think that's one of the things that makes Mother's Milk so endearing as a character, is that he's this big, intimidating guy when he needs to be, but he's got a much softer side to him. He's probably the most together of all the boys.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
guessing. He's the most good-natured. And is more of a realist, and almost has like a little bit of a Zen approach, almost, I think.
Yeah, very kind of Luke Cage-ish, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I think that's
get along.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison, because Cage was kind of that way too, a little more thoughtful soul than just the intimidating guy and the big intimidating guy, and all he wants to do is just get back to his wife/girlfriend, whatever she is, and her kid and their kid. So you feel for him. He's sympathetic, but he also, now with Butcher gone, he's the one that's left looking after the team in Butcher's absence, and especially looking out for somebody like Hughie, who is just
he's all over the place.
He's all over the place, and he wasn't that long ago. He was working as a video store clerk. Yeah. So obviously very out of his depth.
And then
in a lot of ways.
And also, I love the budding relationship between Frenchie and Kimiko. I think it's so sweet. Frenchie is another one of my favorite characters. Aside from just him being, once again, so paternal almost, or brotherly, take your pick with Kimiko. And I just love their budding relationship and how much their trust has grown. And now Kamiko's learning, to write things down. We have that mysterious message that she has written down, which is still a mystery at this point. It's like, what was Kimiko trying to say? And it's like, I love that. And it's beautiful. Once again, amidst all this chaos, we have Annie and Hughie, and we have Kimiko and Frenchie, which is another beautiful relationship. I mean, what were your thoughts on that one?
Well, it's something that the comics did. So I was very happy to see them develop it. That in the comics, Frenchie was essentially almost like a very protective brother to Kimiko. Obviously a friend, but almost acts like a brother. He watches out for her, makes, if she starts to stray down a dark path. Like there's one comic storyline where she kind of goes off and starts to try to make money. She acts as an assassin, a hit woman, and he tries to steer her away from this because it's not good for her. So he watches out for her, almost like a guardian in a lot of ways. But I think with Frenchie, I think there are some underlying, at least in the TV series, there's some underlying romantic feelings as well, at least on his part.
So you think it might actually be that it's becoming love, and so it's not brotherly, but it might be moving into another realm of affection.
A little bit, at least as far as maybe Frenchie wants. I don't know. We don't know yet if that's what Kimiko wants.
Even though we had seen her kind of, doing her nails and combing her hair, and granted, I'm sure she probably wants to look more respectable, possibly, but secondly, she could be doing it also for Frenchie's benefit. I mean, I'm not saying that she's doing it for that reason, but it could be that maybe she's I want to look pretty for him.
Or it's a simple, like, that she feels comfortable, secure, and then she can kind of get back to a semblance of normalcy.
Yeah.
After everything she's experienced and all the trauma she's endured.
You're almost like kind of getting rid of that dirt and kind of blood on her hands and kind of starting anew. Yeah.
Yeah. And also we get to kind of see a little more cleaned up Karen Fukuhara as a result.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is, it doesn't hurt either, right? I'm sure.
No, it does not. Everybody's so pretty in this show.
Far too pretty. Yes, exactly. So it leaves me out completely. But I could never be on the. I'm not good looking enough to be on this show, apparently. So we had getting back to Annie. She tracks down Gecko, records him in a hotel room with a customer, and essentially blackmails him. Like, hey, look, you're going to need to get me this compound V, otherwise I'm going to release this.
It's going to go viral on all social media and all this kind of thing.
And he's kind of horrified because, I thought we were friends from back in the day. And so it's kind of interesting that Annie, already by this point, I think she's seen so much and experienced so much enough that it's hardening her as a person.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And making her more brutal. And
she's losing that innocence that she had.
Yeah, she is.
At the beginning. Yeah.
A little more jaded and not so naive like she was when we were first introduced to her at the beginning of season 1.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad to see her lose that naivete, but for the purposes of what needs to be done, she embraces that and uses that to force Gecko to get her what she wants.
Yeah.
And she's so excited by it, she ends up going back to Hughie and telling him, like, hey, I've got this in motion.
Yeah, see what I did?
Yeah, exactly. So she's already like, quote, burn those effers down. And they're trying to figure out, like, which news outlet they need to reach out to by this point, by the episode's end.
Oh, yeah, she's as excited as can be because she's never really had to. I mean, obviously, it's also a rush for her because she's doing something forbidden. And I have a feeling, that before all this, even it was mentioned that she had very much this church past and she was very sort of, clean living and all this kind of thing. I'm actually surprised she hasn't developed a drinking problem at this point because of all the things that she's seen.
Yeah, I know, right? As we find out later, I mean, without getting into details, it's also affecting her faith as a result, which is something that's very central to her character. Now, one of the things we also see Starlight that she's still working with the Seven.
Yeah.
She's still using that cover to try to act like everything's okay, but even though she knows not everything's okay, and she's still trying to help the boy. So it's almost like she's a double agent.
Yeah.
At this point.
She had me fooled at the beginning. I was like, wait, what? Has Starlight kind of sold her soul? And then we find out
because we kind of see,
case.
we see her with this big crowd. She's there with Homelander. She sings this song for Translucent's funeral, and
she's holding hands with him and saying, this is a great guy and everything else. And I'm like, gag.
And she's kind of wearing that sluttier version of her costume that Vought and others wanted her to wear, insisted on it, to increase her profile and make her appear more sexy. And, not the version of the costume that she wants to wear.
Yeah.
But so she's playing the part at this point.
Yeah.
And we find out that through the course of the episode, no, she's still on Team Boys at the moment, or at the very least Team Hughie. Yeah. And we'll see where that goes. Yeah. It leads down some interesting places. We'll just set that there. But anything else about the boys or Starlight?
No, I mean, I just really like this, and the fact that obviously you can see that there's this void of power that Butcher has left, because everybody's like they see him as their leader, and I'm not saying that it's like wildcats or herding wildcats because nobody knows what they're doing, but you can tell that Butcher, for all the crazy stuff he did, had this under control and was able to be the leader. I think Mother's Milk would be a great, substitute for him, if Butcher did not come back. But you can tell that they really almost need a direction at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. They're all kind of struggling.
Yeah.
They don't like direction is a great description of this. They're lacking in direction. So it's finally at the end of the episode, Butcher makes his reappearance.
Yeah.
In a very Carl Urban way.
Of course.
So what did you make of Butcher's return at the end?
Well, one, I was just so happy because Carl Urban has just gone from strength to strength. Already when he had played Éomer in The Lord of the Rings, which was the very first time I'd actually seen him. I believe that was his breakthrough role, but because I think he was already made well known in New Zealand. But from there to being in the MCU to this, he's just so good.
And Dr. McCoy on the Star Trek movies, I might add.
Of course, yes.
He's a very worthy successor to the late great DeForest Kelley, I might add. I know you're not a Star Trek fan, but I thought I'd mention it because
I'll take that.
I'm a Trek fan. Yeah.
No, but I'll take that because I know
he is scary good as McCoy. He's really good. I highly recommend it.
Well, I mean, I don't know, as I say, whether Peter Jackson was the guy who kind of discovered him and kind of brought him to the forefront, but
I think it at least mainstreamed him. This is his big Lord of the Rings was Urban's big break, and then he also did things like Dread and, like you said, talking about a Scourge, executioner.
Yeah, and he's fantastic. I know folks had problems with his accent because they're like, what is he going for? Is he going for a New Zealand accent? Is he going for a British accent? Now, I actually wanted to ask you this, Charles. In the comics, is Butcher a Brit?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
And it's almost like a Cockney accent.
Okay.
So it kind of fits a little bit.
Right. Yeah, because...
Or at least maybe a Liverpool accent a bit. So it's somewhere in there that he's found his accent. So, Butcher is supposed to be British.
Okay. Yeah, because I know folks were kind of lost with his accent because they said, what's he actually doing? Because, he does slip into his native New Zealand accent. I don't have a problem with that.
It creeps in every so often, yeah.
But you know what? It doesn't bother me. It's not, once again, to bring it up, he's not Dick Van Dyke doing a terrible British accent and failing miserably. Here, it's just his thing, and plus, we don't know Butcher's origins. For all we know, he could have been from New Zealand, moved to the UK, and has kept some of his accent. I'm going with that. That's my headcanon.
Well, the TV show could make a change, I'm sure, but if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be the first time, right? So
exactly. No, but outside of that, to bring it back to this, I was just so happy when he came back. And obviously, just like the boys, I had so many questions. It's like, where were you? What? And in fact, what are you wearing? And all this kind of thing. But of course, we do get the answers for that later down down the line. But yeah, always happy to see him, and I think he's ready to get the band going and going places and back into the right direction.
Well, and obviously Butcher feels that he's the only one that can really lead the team.
Yeah,
he may have faith in Mother's Milk, but I'm sure he feels, at least Butcher feels, that nobody can do it better than he does.
He feels this is his baby.
And he's also a bit of a control freak in that regard, I think.
Yes, that's definitely the case.
He wants to be the guy calling the shots.
That's right. Yeah, he likes it. I mean, I guess he's like obviously the opposite to Homelander, who is definitely another one who's very power hungry. I'm not saying that Butcher is as power hungry, but maybe the two are not so different.
And that's a very good observation. They are very much two sides of the same coin. And we'll see more of that, I'm sure, as the series progresses. Yeah. So, all right, let's move on. Topic number 2. This can be probably a pretty quick topic. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Church of the Collective.
Okay.
So let's talk about the Deep. We can talk about Eagle the Archer and Carol Mannheim and the introduction of this concept where the Deep is struggling. And we can talk about that here in a minute, but he ends up hooking up, or at least getting recruited, by the Church of the Collective, which is a pretty obvious take on Scientology, the Church of Scientology.
That's right.
And as far as how they bring him in and end up converting him to their cause.
Yeah.
So we pick up with the Deep in Sandusky, Ohio.
Is that a real place?
That is a real place. That is the home of the Cedar Point Amusement Park, one of the biggest amusement parks in America.
Is it true that nothing ever happens?
Pretty much, except for the amusement park. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's basically like Sandusky is very northwest Ohio, right? Like right there right up there by Lake Michigan.
Okay.
So. Yeah,
well, thank you for explaining that for the benefit of the Europeans out there.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. If you look up Ohio, the state of Ohio on a map or whatever, you want to find Sandusky, it's very northwest Ohio.
Okay.
Right there along the border of Michigan. All right, but yeah, nothing happens there. It's basically we find the Deep was almost exiled to. Yeah. After getting kicked out of the Seven, and he's not taking things very well because he's watching the funeral of his former teammate Translucent on TV, and they show pictures of various Seven members, and one of the pictures of Translucent has cut off the Deep.
He's been airbrushed out of the photo.
Yeah, or like I think they cropped it out of him or something. But
he's like, that's my shoulder.
Exactly. At first he was getting all emotional about the funeral, about Translucent dying. Then he gets all pissed off and he like really lashes out, starts tearing things up, and ends up getting busted by the popos as a result, by the police. And he ends up in the slammer, and it's there that he gets recruited, and just as he happens to be at his lowest point. So what did you make of the introduction of the Church of the Collective into this series?
Well, like you said, the first thing that came into mind when I saw this was either Scientology or, of course, a cult. So that's what we're dealing with. So it was
all the above.
Exactly, all the above, exactly. But it didn't have me asking questions like, what is the bigger picture when it comes to this group of people? Because, I don't know if they're just in the business of saving souls, or there's more to it. So that's what is often one asks when it comes to these kind of organizations. And of course, we did get introduced to this, should we say, take on Hawkeye or Green Arrow. Take your pick.
Right. Eagle the Archer, Eagle, Hawkeye, I got to think it's more the boys' version of Hawkeye.
Yeah, not to mention the colors were more towards purple, kind of.
Yeah, right.
So there was like the Hawkeye comics, at least the Hawkeye costume in the comics. But that said, It was, yeah, it was just so unnerving. It was unnerving. It's like, yeah, I know what's happening here because they're either going to ask him if he's found Jesus or they're going to ask him something along these lines. So,
Right.
I mean, no disrespect to folks who follow these kind of beliefs, but that's the way it goes. And ever since then, folks have never knocked on my door. So I'm just saying.
Yeah.
but yeah, it was.
Well, I kind of knew something was up with these guys from the get-go because, for one thing, the Eagle the Archer kind of like when after bringing the Deep back to his place, and he starts chatting him up and goes, well, everybody's been at their rock bottom point.
And you're like, I see where you're going with this.
And he's like, hey, do you want a Fresca? And for those who don't know, especially people like Nick that are overseas.
I was going, thank you, Charles. See, you read my mind. Enlighten me. What is Fresca?
All right, so Fresca, for the uninitiated, is a very disappointing soft drink. It is, it's made by the Coca-Cola Company, but it's a very unpopular drink. It's not the type of drink that gets served in restaurants or in soda vending machines.
It's not even a club soda.
It's like the more popular, like if you had Sprite,
right,
or Sierra Mist or 7-Up, some of the more popular uncola drinks. Fresca is like pretty much at rock bottom, just like the Deep is. It's hardly anybody knows about it, let alone drinks it.
Oh.
It's available in stores, but nobody buys it.
And you wonder why they still store it in their shops.
Right.
Unless it's good for a mixed drink, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. The only thing I can think of is that the company still makes it just to hold on to the trademark or something.
Okay.
But so it was very odd to see them like handing the Deep, like, hey, you want a Fresca, and making a big deal about that. Yeah. And it's something that it's kind of becomes a recurring gag throughout season 2. But so for anybody wondering, that's the deal. So right away, I knew these people were weird just because of embracing Fresca. That nobody,
like at least a Dr. Pepper,
Right, exactly.
No, too exciting.
It's like, what, was Mountain Dew busy? What's up with that? So in case anybody's wondering what the deal is with that. All right. They also hand him a book as the Deep is introduced to this woman named Carol Mannheim, who is kind of like the public relations a bit of this church, and hand him a very almost like a very Dianetics book. If you're at all familiar with Dianetics, the L. Ron Hubbard book that became the basis for Scientology. And the cover mock-up is very Dianetics looking. So the satire is pretty dead on here. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of an introduction. So essentially they're trying to recruit Deep, who's someone they see that they can use. And so the question is, you kind of saw how the season played out, so it's a little hard to get into like, well, what did you think of what was going to happen? What did you think of at least the concept of Scientology kind of like trying to recruit celebrities to advance their cause, trying to go for someone vulnerable like the Deep is at this point, to use him for their cause?
Yeah, where have we seen that before? I know, in our reality.
Exactly, right?
No, it was, I mean, but that's obviously what, once again, what a cult does. It takes the disenfranchised, it takes those who are down on their luck, those who are morally weaker, who are not, because you're not going to go to somebody if you're super confident and who's all about, strong in themselves. You're going to go with people who are astray and, once again, need direction. And you provide that direction. That's the basis of the way a cult works.
It can be manipulated as a result, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like,
you can mold them to your own ends.
That's right. So it makes sense that it would happen. And, and obviously when we got to see this, that's why I thought to myself, what is their end game? What are they trying to achieve with the Deep? Obviously, we're not going to go into that, but it was just like that was the main question on my mind. And at first, the Deep is a little bit reticent of wanting to even be a part of this. He's like, what the hell is going on? And all this kind of thing. Because he finds himself asleep on his couch, on the guy's couch. I believe because apparently he'd gotten seriously hammered the night before. Or
right. He got drunk and passed out. Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe he was kind of helped to be a little bit unconscious in that regard.
That's right, But so that was my other thing. And yes, he seems at first obviously he's like reluctant to have anything to do with these people, but slowly but surely they kind of work their way on him. And I still don't know how to feel out about the Deep even after all this, because part of me still hates him for being so awful to women and just abusing them,
especially to Starlight.
That's right, and we know that he's done this before. She's not the first that he's done this to. The other part of me is like, okay, he's getting a taste of his own medicine, which he had gotten during the course of season 1. That was brutal to watch, even though it's gills, but it was still brutal to watch because it was so violent. Right. And so you think he's gotten a taste of his own medicine. Is he redeemable? I think everybody is redeemable if they, with given the right direction, the right people. And I think he could be a redeemable character. But yeah, outside of that, it's just like you wonder where somebody who's so low as he is, where they're going to go with him. Because they're even promising him they'll get him back into the 7, which we know is what he wants more than anything else.
Right, and they're using that. They're using that as they're basically dangling the carrot.
Yeah.
And trying to get him to the Deep to do what they want. Like, with that as the goal.
Yeah.
So, like, if you do what we say, we'll help you get what you want.
Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts on the Deep? I mean, do you have any sympathy for this character?
I don't really have any sympathy for him, but I think right now he's just more interesting to watch. He's watching him go through these struggles, and it's kind of interesting that they're making a point of showing him. Like, this could have been a character that could have been easily forgotten at the end of season 1. We never had to really see him again. But obviously there's something they want to do with this character. Yeah. And we'll see how that plays out.
Somebody must have had a serious grudge towards Aquaman. Seriously.
Yeah. Well, that would be Garth Ennis because when he created the Deep, but a little different there in the comics. But yeah, it was just
you can tell the guy does not like Aquaman.
No, not at all. Or at least doesn't think much of him as a character at the very least.
Yeah,
but we'll see. He's no Jason Momoa. Let's put it that way. All right. Anything else before we move on?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. And like you said, we'll definitely be watching the Deep with interest.
All right. So third and final topic. Let's talk about the 7. Our various. This is the big one, so I thought I'd save that for the end. So we need to talk about Homelander. We need to talk about Stormfront, who makes her debut as a member of the 7, much to Homelander's chagrin. And we also need to talk about Stan Edgar because, hey, Homelander, because he's not so happy with Stormfront being assigned to the team without his approval, has a little chat with Stan, as it turns out. And we can also talk about Ashley Barrett, the handler for the 7, who keeps trying to hold this team together despite someone like Homelander exerting his control over this group and really dominating her, especially when Ashley tries to bring a prospective member of the 7, a guy named Blind Spot, in to meet Homelander, thinking, hey, it'll go well because, hey, Blind Spot would be great for her image because he's visually impaired, and a visually impaired superhero would be perfect, right? Homelander doesn't see it that way. Okay. So what are your thoughts about our big bads this episode?
Well, first off, I have to say, I'm a huge Daredevil fan. And I saw, obviously, I was like, yeah, okay, this is a take on Daredevil.
Exactly.
And I was like, oh, yeah, this is kind of cool and kind of neat. And then, Homelander, boom, breaks smashes his eardrums. And And I was like, oh, dude, really? I mean, is there anything you won't do? You have to be really an arse in everything. And
Yes, he does.
I felt so bad because, like I said, I love Daredevil, and this was kind of my version of Daredevil in this universe. But then it made me think, what if somebody did this to Daredevil as well? He'd be dead immediately. So it got me thinking about, see, supervillains, this is how you take care of Daredevil. But other than that, Homelander never ceases to amaze me. And funny enough, in Italian, his name is Patriota, which is the Patriot, which is a curious translation if you think about it. Because granted, you say Homelander, I guess you couldn't really consider it a synonym of Patriot. I don't know. I mean, it seems odd to me as a synonym. Or that they choose the name Patriot in Italian. I think that was the closest term they could find. But it really highlights, I think, the fascist side of patriotism. And that's maybe why they chose the name Patriot as his Italian, in his Italian name. But yeah.
So like patriotism taken to excess.
Yeah, when it goes into nationalism.
Extremes.
And hence, extreme nationalism, if you will. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of share that little bit of trivia with the listeners, that in Italian, folks like to take their liberties with certain character names. But
I learned something today. I hope everybody else did out there as well.
But yeah, outside of that, this character is so multifaceted because on one side he's like, the big bully, dare I say, reminiscent of a certain man in the White House a little bit, but for certain things that he does.
A little bit.
But other than that, we see that he also is incredibly disturbed. I mean, when he goes into the fridge and takes out the milk.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. So just to kind of set this table a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
So Homelander, as we saw in season 1, kind of had this fetish arrangement with Madeline Stillwell, the Seven's previous handler, and as a result, we learned that Homelander has a fetish for breast milk.
Yeah,
and because of this, he starts walking. And remember, Homelander was the one who killed Madeline, and framing the boy, Butcher especially, for the crime. To cover it up, but he still had feelings for Madeline, as it turns out. And he goes into her office, kind of just looks around at the office of the woman that he had killed, and even though he had supposedly cared for, and he opens up a mini fridge and pulls out that bottle of breast milk.
Yeah, I was like, don't do it, don't do it.
Well, first he heats it up with his heat vision to make it room temperature, I guess. And then he kind of like dabs his tongue, just like a little taste to see if it's the right temperature, I guess.
He almost laps it up like a cat at first would.
Right, exactly, yeah. So he kind of like, just a little bit on the tongue, the tip of the tongue, and then he starts like, okay, I'm going for this. And downs the whole bottle, just as Ashley walks into the room, catching him in the process.
Yeah. Good thing I was just having popcorn at the time, because seriously, I would have been sick. Seriously.
That's just milk. It's nutrients, right? Right?
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe I'm more. You know what? I don't mind blood and guts, but when it comes to those kind of things, it will make me kind of a little bit squeamish. But maybe
you watch Hellraiser movies, for crying out loud.
Yeah, but you don't have people, whatever. But we'll get into the things that Nick.
If a Cenobite did it, would that make it okay? Or
no, it would
if like Pinhead down a bottle of breast milk, would that make it okay?
It would be awful. It would be awful. But no, it was just like that was terrible. But it shows you what a crazy character he is. And you were mentioning, of course, that now Ashley has become literally the vice president of Vought at this point. Obviously because she's somebody that Homelander knows he can intimidate. And it's, I guess, because obviously he can't take over Vought, or rather can't be made vice president. So she's his puppet, obviously. So, because she's terrified of him, and whatever he says goes. And So obviously, that's obviously, I suppose, why he chose her, because he knew she was so insecure and so kind of terrified, and he would never be able to pull something like this on the previous vice
On
president.
Madeline,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's
and she's, I was just going to say that Ashley, she's towing that company line, trying to push, a character like Blind Spot into the team, and Homelander exerting his control and showing again his authority over the situation. Intimidation intimidates her, and by shocking her, and just to kind of prove that he can do, just to kind of he does something shocking so that to snap her into line, and like, well, if I could do it to this guy, I could easily do that to you too.
Yeah.
If you don't go along with what I want, I don't care what the company wants.
Even during the focus group, when they're thinking of the name, what do we do? Go with supervillains, super terrorists, etc. There's that whole focus group about it, which is typical in any company in marketing. And she, doesn't obviously get a say at all, because he starts whispering at her and looking at her and stuff and bullying her psychologically. And so, it's literally mobbing in that case. That it's mobbing, plain and simple. So he's ostensibly become the vice president of Vought indirectly. Yeah.
And so, he's obviously, then he gets thrown for a big loop when they're apparently making a movie called, what is it, like the Origin of the Seven or something like that.
Yeah. It's like on this military backdrop, and they're doing them with the soldiers. I thought it was like a commercial for the military.
Oh, that's what it was. They haven't done the movie yet. That's right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, it was like some kind of Save America campaign or something.
Yeah. In order to get the seven into the army.
Yeah. Because they're trying to push the agenda that they want Vought to they want to militarize superheroes.
Yeah.
And so they're pushing this agenda. You're right. They're filming this commercial, and Stormfront just happens to show up on the set.
Yeah.
And she's appears to be very media savvy. She's got her cell phone, and she's talking to her followers.
Very influencer-like.
Exactly. Like, she's live streaming whatever she's doing, and she kind of like live streams going up to Homelander and introducing herself, like, "Hey, I'm Stormfront. I'm the new member of the Seven." And Homelander just kind of glares at her, like, "You're who? Like, who is this?"
And then he smiles at her, and you know that when Homelander is smiling at you, it's never good news.
No, not at all. Not at all. And the guy who plays him, Antony Starr, that should be easy to remember, right? Antony Starr, he's so good. He's so mesmerizing as Homelander, and you see like a billion things going on behind these psychotic eyes. Just in his facial expressions and his body language, and it's just really fascinating to watch for me.
I believe he was actually at one point opted to play Captain America at one point before Chris Evans got the part, and he would have done well. But I mean, it would have been very.
There's no Chris Evans though.
No, this is true, and role reversal. I could not have seen Chris Evans do Homelander. Same thing. It's just
true.
But yeah, apparently.
And Chris Evans has played bad guys before.
Yes, he has, of course. But as I said, it's apparently I think he had actually auditioned for the role of Captain America before he got this. So it's interesting to and maybe he's pulling that off a little bit of what he had kind of done to kind of study for the role of Captain America.
Right. Maybe. Or at least doing like what he thought would be a bad guy version of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so Homelander not very happy about this, and he decides to pay a little visit to Stan Edgar, the head of Vought, and he basically says, "Look, Stan, I thought I was going to get consulted on any new additions to the group," and acting like, well, hey, I wasn't consulted, so, I've been kind of thinking that, when my contract ends, maybe I'll take my talents elsewhere.
Yeah.
And trying to use that as some kind of negotiating leverage.
Yeah. And he doesn't get the desired effect.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Because Stan explains to Homelander that apparently Homelander thinks they're like a superhero company when in fact they're just a pharmaceutical company. Mm-hmm. And Homelander is just their most valuable asset.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Homelander is not their most valuable. It's Compound V that's their most valuable
That's right.
asset.
That's their most valuable product.
That's what I was trying to think. And so Homelander, essentially is being put in this place here going, look, all we care about is Compound V. We don't care about you.
Yeah.
You're replaceable as far as Vought is concerned.
That's right.
And that's obviously something that doesn't go over well, especially when you take into account his psychosis and his ability, his need for control.
And also, he's not used to being told no. He is just not used to it.
Yeah, that's that spoiled, petulant child that exists within this Superman-like body.
Yeah.
And so he gets frustrated and flies off to Becca's house and to go see his son, and that's where we leave him.
That's right, yeah. And I was so glad that the actress who played Patty Spivot in the Flash, is
Chantal Van Santen, yeah.
Who, by the way, her character was still criminally cut from that show because she was an excellent Patty Spivot. So I'm just saying, but that's
well, they just came out with a news article about that. Interesting that you brought this up. Apparently, Chantal Van Santen kind of hinted that the reason she was not brought back on the Flash and written out of the show was because of executive producer Andrew Kreisberg, who was with the show at that one time, but had later fell into various accusations of sexual harassment.
Once again,
it was essentially kicked off the show, and so it kind of sounds like maybe she experienced something to that effect. We don't know exactly what. But apparently she and Kreisberg didn't get along at the very least. Mm. And Kreisberg used his power as executive producer to get her off the show.
No, which is criminal because Chantal is a wonderful, wonderful actress, right. And but I'm so glad that she got this, should we say, new superhero lease on life in The Boys. So that was fantastic. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that she would find work because she's a great actress. So no surprise. Right.
I don't know why they couldn't just bring Patty back if they wanted to.
Well, I mean,
but now that Barry's with Iris, I guess, is there really a point?
Yeah, exactly. That storyline, I think, is gone for now, at least.
Sorry about the Flash digression, but it's Nick and I. And,
exactly.
It's going to happen sooner or later because we're both big Flash fans.
Yeah. Speaking of that, to bring up the whole thing of the president of Vought up again. The fact that we find out that it was kind of pretty much the company was founded through the experiments of a Nazi scientist. I thought that was big, man. I mean, I was like,
right.
And the whole thing of it's obviously a hint, not a hint, but I guess it's almost like a criticism on Project Paperclip, where, of course, Nazi scientists were being scooped up by the Allies, regardless of their terrible crimes. I'm looking at you, right. Klaus Barbie, and folks of this nature.
See, I told you you'd have a couple of thoughts about this.
Yes. Well, you bring in Nazis, of course, as you quoted Indiana Jones, Nazis, I hate these guys.
I hate these guys. Yeah, exactly.
So I thought it was interesting that they gave us the fact that maybe it's a criticism towards, one Project Paperclip, and to the fact that a lot of pharmaceutical companies or pharmaceutical breakthroughs came at the expense of human beings.
Right. And Nazi scientists like that ended up getting a pass from our government because all we cared about were, the ends. How they say the ends justify the means?
And beating the commies and everything, of course.
Exactly. That whole race and it started off obviously in World War II when we were so desperate for the atomic bomb that we brought in scientists like, Albert Einstein, thankfully not a Nazi as far as we know, until history proves us otherwise. But, that we were so desperate to achieve that. And the boys here makes use of that Nazi science being the foundations for Compound V and therefore the Seven and therefore Homelander. Yeah. And Stormfront, needless to say, has a very important historical part to play in this story as a result.
In fact, it will tie in nicely to that, to the origins that we got of Vought Industries. So, yes.
But to be continued on that one.
Yes.
So we'll leave that there because we've already talked enough as it is. So you probably are like, okay, you guys need to save some of that for other episodes, right? All right. So I don't know if you have any favorite quotes.
I did have a couple, and it's.
I'm sorry. Did you have anything else before we get started?
No. All in all, as I said, just a great start to a second season. Really, really enjoyed it, and as we said, this is an hour-long episode, so we had to talk. We had to talk quite a bit about it. So
we did.
It's not like a kind of flash thing. There's tons of things to talk about. So yes, wonderful, wonderful start, and I was ready for episode 2 to load up.
Well, I'll just throw out a couple of quotes here for the sake of time. Just a couple ones that kind of stuck in my head. Mother's Milk saying, and I'm going to, clean this up for Southgate Media Group. If you're the effing reason why I can't finish that Vermont country dollhouse, I will effing end you.
Love that one. Yeah, I had that one on my list too.
That was a good one. And then Hughie talking with Frenchie, where Hughie is discussing his role in the group, and he's like, so maybe I can't be Lee Marvin, but it can be Harry Potter or, John Connor or what's her name from the Hunger Games? And Frenchie says, Katniss. Hughie's like, yeah. The point is, I could be that person who nobody thinks is awesome, but it turns out they're kind of effing awesome.
I love that. And plus, of course, all the mainstream pop culture references, I knew you had to do that. You being one of the masters of pop culture references,
I can only, I say I'm number 2 on that regard. I say number 1 becomes a certain Zan Sprouse in that regard.
Who will definitely be mentioned here shortly as well.
Yes, she will. Yes, she will.
When it comes to quotes, I just had a quick one myself between Hughie and Mother's Milk. Hughie is saying, so we're saying that Vought may have just assassinated the deputy director of the CIA. Mother's Milk, and now we're in the middle of that too. Happy now, Mother Trucker.
Very funny. Yeah, that was good. Gecko also had a pretty good line real quick. Pontius Pilate and Mary hooking up? Sacrilegious.
Nice. Oh, yes, and we did get the head of the CIA's head being exploding, by the way, just to mention that, folks.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but not the last time we see some heads exploding. Just got to point that there. Yeah. So stay tuned for that. Keep that in the back of your head as we talk more episodes. All right, what's your rating for this one?
I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. A 9 out of 10 exploding heads.
Oh, you really like this one.
Yes, indeedy.
Yeah, I thought it was a strong opening, but having seen the rest of the season, I know there's stronger episodes. So I'm only going to give this one 8.5 out of 10 bottles of breast milk.
Okay, you had to go there.
It was either that or cans of Fresca, so.
Fine. It works, I guess.
So I'm only slightly under you, but yeah, bottles of breast milk. So drink up, kids. All right.
Jeez.
I know. I don't have any Phantom Zone news because we've been off for a while, and there hasn't really been that much in the way of news. Apart from just that, got some great news that Sandman, the TV series, the Netflix series, has started production.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. That's going to be epic. At least I hope it will be.
I certainly hope so. And yeah, it was great news that finally it's being filmed. So hopefully worth the wait.
And hopefully this year we'll get WandaVision. Hopefully. They say coming soon or coming this year. But
they were thinking November, but apparently they came up with like a November promo for Disney Plus. And WandaVision was not part of that.
I'm still holding out hope.
They still say 2020, so probably December we'll get it. Which that'll actually be nice. The holidays will be around, and that'll be a good time to get some eyes on it, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
So, especially since there's not going to be much else in the way of programming, especially superhero TV programming around the holidays.
2021 and 2022 are going to be packed. Seriously.
January is going to be huge. Yeah. We're going to be very, very busy here in the Phantom Zone. Just saying. But for right now, we're talking boys, and that's okay. Didn't get any mail. I put a little feeler out for everybody if they want to write in and share your thoughts about the boys as we discuss these episodes. So if you'd like to write in, we'd be more than happy to read your letters here on the podcast. We'd definitely appreciate that, as we do for all of the podcasts that I do and Nick does. Phantom Zone fan mail, please reach out to us at phantomzonecast@gmail.com. That's phantomzonecast@gmail.com. Or you can find us on Twitter at PhantomZoneCast on Twitter, Facebook, The Phantom Zone Podcast, or Instagram at Phantom Zone Podcast. We definitely appreciate it if you did, because obviously we'd love to spread our discussions of the boys around, get more listeners, more downloads, and entertain more people in the process.
Certainly.
And Nick, how about you? Where can they find your fine work, sir?
Well, for brevity's sake, for you country fans out there, I do host the Whiskey and Cigarettes show where we play today's country, traditional country, and everything else in between. For more about that and where to tune in, you can visit our website. That's whiskeyandcigarettesshow.com. Podcast-wise, if superheroes are your jam, or superhero movies, I should say, even psychotic ones, I do host Happiness and Darkness, the superhero movie podcast where we discuss superheroes from superhero movies from Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, Image, and more. To join us to discuss a superhero movie of your choice, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and shoot us an email at happinessanddarknesshow@gmail.com. And of course, Gold Standard, the Oscars movie podcast, where with co-hosts Zan Sprouse, the aforementioned wonderful Zan Sprouse.
Yay.
Yes, yay indeed, and Rachel Friend from our good friends at the Five-ish Fangirls. We are discussing all the movies that won the Oscar for Best Picture from 1927's Wings to the present day. To get in the conversation, discuss your favorite Oscar winner, feel free to shoot us an email at goldstandardoscars@gmail.com, and you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. What about you, Charles?
Oh, nicely done, sir. All right. As for me, of course, at Charles Skaggs on Twitter, at Charles Skaggs on Instagram. Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio on Facebook, if you'd like to reach me out there. And, of course, my blog of geeky things.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn Good Coffee and Hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on the Phantom Zone podcast, all kinds of comic book TV show news, comics news, TV news of my other podcasts that I do for Southgate Media Group, including Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast that I do with Jesse Jackson, and assorted special guest companions like a certain DJ Nick, where we talk Doctor Who, Torchwood, the Sarah Jane Adventures, and more. And then also Titan Talk, the Titans podcast that Nick and I finished up here not too long ago, where we discussed Doom Patrol Season 2. Mm-hmm. And as we eagerly await Titans Season 3, whenever that appears in 2021, fingers crossed, on HBO Max now, as they're shuttering DC Universe, so at least as far as comic book TV goes. And then Ghost with the Twin Peaks podcast with, hey, that aforementioned Zan Sprouse that all the cool kids are talking about these days, where Zan and I talk, of course, Twin Peaks. We talk about David Lynch on Ghostwood, and currently we are wrapping up. We'll be doing the 6th of our 6-part series of Twin Peaks actors who have appeared on the X-Files, and we're going to be wrapping up with a certain Richard Beymer, who played Benjamin Horne on Twin Peaks, and he is going to be in our last X-Files episode. We're going to be discussing Sanguinarium from the 4th season of the X-Files. So hope everybody checks that out. Our X-Files discussions, I think, have been pretty well regarded by our listeners.
They've been very well received.
They've been a lot of fun, and everybody seems to be enjoying them. And I'm kind of going to be a little sad to see them go. But obviously, we're going to talk about some more things on Ghostwood. And once we wrap up the X-Files, we're probably going to be discussing David Lynch's film, The Elephant Man.
Ooh.
And we'll be discussing the new Criterion Collection release that just came out last month.
Ooh,
so
nice.
We'll be right on top of that one. Perfect timing. And great one for the Halloween season. Perfect. Here in the States.
See, you couldn't have planned it any better.
I love it when a plan comes together, to quote a certain John Hannibal Smith from the A-Team. All right. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Nick, thank you for agreeing to discuss The Boys Season 2 with me. I really appreciate it, especially since, Titan Talk's been on hiatus and kind of give us another thing to do together. So I'm really appreciative of you agreeing to do this, and I'm really going to enjoy these next 7 weeks.
Oh, you and me both, Charles. Thank you. I mean, granted, I didn't need much persuading. Let's be honest, folks. I mean, you know, a good friend.
I was trying to make it sound more important.
Well, you know what?
Like a bigger deal.
A good friend of yours contacts you and says, "Hey, do you want to discuss The Boys?" Yeah, what are you going to say? Of course you're going to say yes. But yeah, no, thank you again, Charles, for the opportunity. Really excited for these next 7 episodes for sure, and it's going to be a fun ride.
So, Nick, thank you again. Everybody, I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion. Come on back next time for episode 192 of the Fandom Zone as we discuss proper preparation and planning, the 3 Ps. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have more boys to talk about. Got to find out what the Homelander is up to. And that Stormfront, she's a shady one. So everybody, we'll see you next time right here on the Phantom Zone podcast. Goodbye, everybody.
Ciao.